The metal walls of the starship Valiant hummed with energy as Commander Jake Morrison walked through the corridors toward the briefing room. His boots made soft sounds against the polished floor, and the lights above cast long shadows that moved. With each step, the ship felt alive around him, filled with the voices of hundreds of crew members from different worlds and species. Jake had been part of the Galactic Alliance for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the war against the Vex Empire. The war had been going on for much longer than that, but humans were still the newest members of the Alliance. Most of the other species had been fighting the Vex for decades, and they had learned to work together in ways that amazed Jake every day. When he reached the briefing room, his squad mates were already there. Lieutenant Zextar stood near the large window that looked out into space, his tall blue body moving with the grace that all Zephyrians seemed to have. His skin was the color of deep ocean water, and his eyes were like silver coins. Captain Vorth sat at the metal table, his crystalline form catching the light and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. The Kandorians were made of some kind of living crystal that no human scientist had ever fully understood. Dr. Krillith was reading something on his datapad, his 6 arms moving in the quick way that all Trilaxians did when they were thinking hard. His gray skin was covered in small scales that changed color when he was excited or worried. Right now they were a pale green, which meant he was curious about something. Sergeant Lisa Hayes was the only other human in the room. She looked up when Jake entered and gave him a small nod. Lisa had been his friend since their first day in the Alliance, and she understood him better than anyone else on the ship. She was also one of the best soldiers Jake had ever worked with, human or alien. "Morrison, you are just in time," Zextar said, his voice carrying the musical quality that made Zephyrian speech sound like singing. "We were just discussing the interesting things that Dr. Krillith has discovered about human history." Jake took his seat at the table and looked around at his squad mates. They had fought together in dozens of battles, and he trusted each of them with his life. But sometimes he felt like they saw him and Lisa as curiosities rather than equals. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and there was so much that the other species did not understand about them. What kind of things? Jake asked, though he had a feeling he already knew what was coming. Dr. Krillith looked up from his datapad, his scaled face showing the expression that Trilaxians made when they were about to share knowledge. "I have been studying human mythology for my research into species development. The stories your people created before they developed space travel are quite fascinating from an anthropological perspective." "Fascinating might not be the right word," Zextar said with a laugh. "Some of these stories are completely impossible. Listen to this one." He picked up his own datapad and began to read. The humans believed in a god named Zeus who could control lightning and throw it like a weapon. They thought he could move mountains and change the weather with his thoughts. Captain Vorth's crystalline form made a sound like wind chimes, which was how Kandorians laughed. "And here is another one about a warrior named Hercules who could fight entire armies by himself. The story says he once held up the entire sky to save the world." "The physics alone make these stories impossible," Dr. Krillith added, his scales turning a brighter green with excitement. "Organic muscle tissue has very clear limits. No biological creature could generate the kind of force needed to move mountains or control weather patterns." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. His hand moved without thinking to touch the small lump under his uniform where his medallion hung. The bronze disc had been in his family for generations, passed down from father to son, along with stories that his squadmates would probably find just as impossible as the myths they were discussing. "It is amazing how primitive minds tried to explain the world around them," Zextar continued. "When they could not understand something, they invented gods and heroes to make sense of it. Very creative, but completely divorced from reality. They probably never imagined that one day they would be traveling between stars with other species," Vorth added. "If they could see humans now, working alongside advanced civilizations, they would think that was just as impossible as their old myths." Lisa shifted in her seat, and Jake could see that she was getting uncomfortable with the conversation. She knew things about Jake's family that the others did not, and she understood why this kind of talk bothered him. She tried to change the subject by asking about their next mission, but Jake found himself speaking before she could. What if they were not trying to explain the impossible? He said quietly, what if they were remembering it? The room fell silent. His squadmates all turned to look at him, and Jake could see surprise and concern in their alien faces. He had always been the quiet one in the group, the human who listened more than he spoke, and who never argued with the others about their opinions on human culture. Morrison, Captain Vorth said carefully, his voice making soft crystal sounds, you have been an excellent soldier and a valued member of this squad. Please do not let primitive superstitions cloud your judgment. These stories are just stories, nothing more. Jake stood up slowly, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. There was something in his expression that none of them had seen before. A kind of intensity that made the air in the room feel heavier. We have a mission briefing in 6 hours. I suggest we all use that time to prepare our equipment and review the tactical plans. As the briefing broke up and the others began to file out of the room, Lisa stayed behind. When they were alone, she moved closer to Jake and spoke in a whisper. You need to keep it together. They do not understand what you are, and this is not the time to show them. Jake's fingers traced the outline of the medallion through his uniform. Maybe it is time they learned the truth about what humans really are. Not yet, Lisa said firmly. The war is not over, and we still need them to trust us. If they knew what your family line really represents, everything would change. Jake looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Vex Empire was still fighting, still trying to destroy everything that the Alliance had built. His squadmates were good soldiers and good people, but they saw humans as clever but weak creatures who had gotten lucky enough to develop space travel. They had no idea that humans were capable of so much more. The bronze medallion felt warm against his chest, and Jake wondered if his ancestors had felt this same frustration when they had to hide their true nature from the world around them. The stories that his squadmates called myths were not stories at all, but memories passed down through generations of his family. Memories of a time when humans had been something more than they appeared to be. 6 hours, Jake said to Lisa as she headed toward the door. Make sure your equipment is ready. Something tells me this mission is going to be different from the others. Lisa paused at the doorway and looked back at him. Promise me you will not do anything reckless. The squad depends on you, and so do I. Jake nodded, but his hand remained on the medallion. I promise I will do whatever it takes to complete the mission and bring everyone home safely. After Lisa left, Jake remained in the briefing room alone, looking out at the stars and thinking about the weight of secrets that had been carried by his family for so many generations. Soon, he thought, his squadmates would learn that human myths were not just stories after all. The alarm bells echoed through the corridors of the starship Valiant as Commander Jake Morrison made his way to the war room. Red lights flashed along the walls, casting everything in a crimson glow that meant urgent orders had arrived from Alliance Command. Jake had been expecting this call for weeks, ever since intelligence reports started coming in about unusual Vex activity in the Outer Rim territories. When he entered the war room, Admiral Brooks was already there, her weathered face showing the strain of 3 years of constant warfare. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler 442b system, with red markers indicating enemy positions and defensive structures. Morrison, your squad has been selected for a special mission, the Admiral said without wasting time on pleasantries. Intelligence has discovered that the Vex Empire is developing a new weapon on Kepler 442b. Early reports suggest this weapon could destroy entire star systems. Jake studied the holographic display, noting the massive fortress that dominated the planet's northern continent. The structure was unlike anything he had seen before, with energy readings that made his tactical computer flash warning messages. What kind of weapon are we talking about, Admiral? We do not know the exact details, but our scientists believe it involves manipulating gravity fields on a massive scale. If the Vex complete this project, they could collapse suns or tear apart Planets from across the galaxy. Admiral Brooks touched a control, and the display zoomed in on the fortress. Your mission is to infiltrate the facility, gather intelligence on the weapon, and destroy it if possible. Jake's squad mates filed into the war room as the Admiral continued the briefing. Lieutenant Zextar moved with his usual graceful steps, while Captain Vorth's crystalline form reflected the red emergency lights in prismatic patterns. Dr. Krillith carried several datapads, already researching everything he could find about the target planet. Sergeant Lisa Hayes took her position beside Jake, her expression serious as she studied the tactical display. The fortress is heavily defended, Admiral Brooks continued. Satellite imagery shows over 200 Vex soldiers stationed there, along with automated defense systems and energy shields. Getting inside will require stealth and precision. What about extraction? Lisa asked. If we succeed in destroying the weapon, the entire facility will be on high alert. You will have a narrow window to reach the extraction point before reinforcements arrive. The stealth ship will wait for you at these coordinates. The Admiral highlighted a location several miles from the fortress. If you miss the extraction window, you will be on your own until we can organize a rescue mission. As the briefing continued, Jake noticed that his squad mates were unusually quiet. Normally they would be asking questions about enemy capabilities and discussing tactical options, but today they seemed distracted. He realized they were still thinking about the conversation from earlier, when they had been mocking human mythology and he had reacted more strongly than usual. Dr. Krillith finally spoke up, his scales showing the pale yellow color that meant he was worried. Commander Morrison, I hope our earlier discussion has not affected your judgment. This mission requires clear thinking and careful planning. My judgment is fine, Doctor, Jake replied, but he could see that his squad mates were not convinced. They had served together for 3 years, and they knew each other well enough to sense when something was different. Jake's reaction to their comments about human myths had surprised them, and now they were questioning whether he was mentally prepared for such a dangerous mission. Lieutenant Zextar stepped forward, his silver eyes reflecting concern. Perhaps we should discuss the tactical approach. The fortress has multiple entry points, but all of them are heavily guarded. We will need to coordinate our movements perfectly to avoid detection. Agreed, Captain Vorth said, his crystalline voice carrying harmonics that indicated deep thought. The energy shields around the facility operate on a rotating frequency. If we can time our approach correctly, we might be able to slip through during the transition periods. Jake listened to his squad mates discuss the mission parameters, but part of his mind was elsewhere. He could feel the weight of the bronze medallion against his chest, and he found himself thinking about the stories his grandfather had told him when he was young. Stories about ancestors who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, through strength and determination that seemed superhuman to those who witnessed it. The weapon facility is located in the deepest part of the fortress, Admiral Brooks sighed, bringing Jake's attention back to the briefing. Intelligence suggests it is protected by multiple layers of security, including both electronic and physical barriers. You will need to work together as a team to overcome these obstacles. What if we encounter resistance that we cannot handle? Dr. Krillith asked. The mission parameters suggest that we may be facing odds that are beyond our normal capabilities. Jake looked at his squad mates, and for a moment he considered telling them the truth about what he was capable of when pushed to his limits. But Lisa caught his eye and gave him a subtle shake of her head. She was right, he realized. They were not ready for that knowledge, and revealing it now would only create more problems. We adapt and overcome, Jake said simply. We have faced difficult missions before, and we have always found a way to succeed, but this is different, Zextar insisted. The scale of this operation, the importance of the target, the level of enemy resistance we can expect. Everything about this mission is beyond anything we have attempted before. Then we rise to meet the challenge, Jake replied, his voice carrying a confidence that surprised even himself. We are Alliance soldiers, and we do not fail when the galaxy depends on us, Admiral Brooks nodded approvingly. Your transport leaves in 4 hours. Use that time to prepare your equipment and review the mission files. Dismissed. As the briefing ended and the others began to file out, Jake remained behind to study the holographic display more carefully. The fortress looked impregnable, with defensive systems that would challenge even the most elite military units. But Jake found himself thinking less about the tactical difficulties and more about what would happen if his squad mates were injured or killed during the mission. Lisa approached him as he stood staring at the display. "You are thinking about using your abilities, are you not?" "I am thinking about completing the mission and bringing everyone home alive," Jake replied. "Whatever that requires." "Be careful, Jake. If you reveal what you really are, there will be no going back. The Alliance, the other species, everything will change." Jake touched the medallion through his uniform, feeling the ancient bronze warm under his fingers. Maybe it is time for things to change. Maybe the galaxy needs to know that humans are more than they appear to be. Or maybe, Lisa said quietly, the galaxy needs humans to stay exactly as they appear to be. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal? Jake looked at his friend, understanding the weight of her words. For generations, his family had kept their true nature hidden from the world, living as ordinary humans while carrying the genetic legacy of something far more powerful. The stories that other species called myths were real memories, passed down through bloodlines that stretched back to the earliest days of human civilization. 4 hours, Jake said finally. Make sure your equipment is ready. Something tells me this mission will test all of us in ways we have never been tested before. As Lisa left the war room, Jake remained alone with the holographic display, studying the enemy fortress and thinking about the choice that lay ahead of him. He could complete this mission as Commander Jake Morrison, human soldier and Alliance officer, or he could complete it as something else entirely, something that would force the galaxy to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. The bronze medallion felt heavier against his chest as he made his decision. The stealth ship Shadow's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442b system, its hull barely visible against the black void of space. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the cockpit beside the pilot, watching the alien planet grow larger on the view screen. The world was covered in dense purple forests and jagged mountain ranges, with the massive Vex fortress visible as a dark stain on the northern continent. "Atmospheric entry in 15 minutes, the pilot announced. "Sensors are showing increased patrol activity around the target zone. The enemy knows something is coming." Jake nodded and made his way back to the cargo bay where his squad mates were making final preparations. Lieutenant Zexstar was checking his plasma rifle for the 3rd time, his blue skin showing the darker patches that appeared when Zephyrians were nervous. Captain Vorth stood motionless in the center of the bay, his crystalline form pulsing with soft light as he ran internal diagnostics on his equipment. Dr. Krillith had surrounded himself with sensor equipment and communication devices, his 6 arms moving in complex patterns as he calibrated each piece of technology. Sergeant Lisa Hayes sat quietly in the corner, her eyes closed as she went through the mental exercises that all human soldiers learn to control fear and focus their minds. 5 minutes to drop zone, the pilot's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. Stealth fields are holding, but we are picking up some unusual energy readings from the fortress. Jake felt the familiar weight of the bronze medallion against his chest as he checked his own equipment one final time. His rifle was clean and loaded, his armor was sealed and functioning, and his tactical computer was displaying the mission parameters. Everything was ready, but something felt different about this mission. The air in the cargo bay seemed charged with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Remember the plan?" Jake said to his squad mates as they prepared for insertion. "We land in the forest, move to the fortress under cover of darkness, and infiltrate through the eastern service entrance. Minimal communication once we are on the ground. What if we encounter more resistance than expected?" Zexstar asked, his musical voice carrying a note of concern that Jake had never heard before. "We adapt and overcome," Jake replied, but he could see that his squad mates were not satisfied with that answer. They had been acting strangely ever since the briefing, watching him with expressions that mixed curiosity and worry. The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, and Jake could feel the artificial gravity fluctuating as the pilot fought to maintain stealth while navigating the turbulent air currents. Through the small windows, he could see the purple forest rushing past below, its alien trees twisted into shapes that no human eyes had ever seen before. "Drop zone in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "Sensors are showing clear skies, but there are energy signatures moving through the forest. Possible patrol units." Jake moved to the cargo bay door as the ship began to slow, his hand instinctively moving to the medallion beneath his uniform. For a moment he felt something stir. Deep inside him, a sensation like electricity running through his veins. But he pushed the feeling down. Focusing on the mission ahead, the cargo bay door opened with a soft hiss, revealing the alien landscape below. The ship hovered 20 feet above the forest floor, its engines barely audible as the pilot held position. Jake could smell the strange, sweet scent of the purple vegetation and feel the warm, humid air against his face. "Go, go, go," he shouted, and the squad rappelled down their deployment lines into the forest. The moment Jake's feet touched the ground, he knew something was wrong. The forest was too quiet, with none of the animal sounds that should have been present in such a dense ecosystem. The trees around them were massive, their purple leaves creating a canopy so thick that very little light reached the forest floor. "Perimeter secure," Lisa's voice whispered through his earpiece. "No immediate threats detected." Jake signaled for the squad to move toward the fortress, but as they began to advance through the undergrowth, the world exploded around them. Energy bolts erupted from the trees, lighting up the forest with brilliant flashes of blue and white. The ambush had been perfectly planned, with Vex soldiers positioned in a circle around their landing zone. "Contact! Contact!" Zexstar shouted into his communicator as he dove behind a fallen log. "We are taking fire from multiple directions." Jake rolled behind a massive tree trunk as plasma bolts seared the air where he had been standing. The Vex had been waiting for them, which meant either their intelligence was compromised or the enemy had detected their approach despite the stealth systems. "Shadow's Edge, we need immediate extraction," Dr. Krillith called over the radio, but there was no response. The ship had either been destroyed or forced to retreat, leaving them stranded on the hostile planet. "We need to move," Jake shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "They are trying to pin us down until reinforcements arrive." The squad began to fight their way through the forest, moving from tree to tree as enemy soldiers closed in around them. Jake could see muzzle flashes in the purple shadows, and he counted at least 20 Vex warriors moving through the undergrowth with the practiced coordination of elite troops. "Captain," Vorth's crystalline form suddenly cracked with a sound like breaking glass. A plasma bolt had struck him in the shoulder, and the fluid that sustained his life was leaking out in bright streams. He stumbled and fell, his usual grace replaced by the awkward movements of serious injury. "Vorth is down," Lisa called out, as she provided covering fire. "We need to get him to safety." Lieutenant Zexstar tried to reach the injured Kandorian but was forced back by concentrated enemy fire. A plasma bolt caught him in the leg, and Jake could see the blue blood spreading across his uniform as he fell behind a cluster of rocks. "Multiple casualties," Dr. Krillith reported, his voice tight with pain. "I am also hit, but I can still move." Jake looked around the forest battlefield, counting the enemy positions and calculating their chances of survival. The Vex had superior numbers and better positions, while his squad was wounded and scattered. Their mission had become a fight for survival, with no hope of extraction and no way to call for help. "We need to abort," Zexstar said through gritted teeth as he applied pressure to his wounded leg. "The mission is compromised. We should try to find a place to hide until rescue arrives." "Negative," Jake replied, his voice carrying a tone that his squadmates had never heard before. "We complete the mission. Are you insane?" Captain Vorth's voice crackled through his damaged translator. "We can barely defend ourselves, let alone assault a fortress with 200 enemy soldiers." Jake looked at his wounded friends, then at the distant fortress that glowed with enemy lights through the trees. The medallion felt warm against his chest. and he could feel that strange electricity beginning to flow through his body again. The sensation was stronger now, as if something deep inside him was awakening in response to the danger. "Lisa, stay with the others and keep them alive," Jake said, pulling out his medallion for the first time in front of his alien squadmates. "I will handle the fortress." The bronze disc caught the light from the enemy weapons, and his squadmates could see the ancient figure carved into its surface. The image showed a man wielding lightning bolts, his face bearing a striking resemblance to Jake's own features. "Morrison, you are talking about a suicide mission," Dr. Krillith said, his scales showing the deep red color of fear. "That fortress has hundreds of soldiers and automated defenses. No single person could—" Jake smiled grimly as he felt the power of his ancestors stirring in his blood. "Some family traditions run deeper than you think?" He moved toward the fortress, leaving his squadmates behind in the forest. Behind him, he could hear their voices calling his name, but he did not look back. The time for hiding was over, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped. Pretending to be normal, the bronze medallion pulsed with warmth against his chest as Jake Morrison walked toward his destiny. Commander Jake Morrison moved through the purple forest like a shadow, his footsteps making no sound on the thick carpet of alien leaves. Behind him, the sounds of battle had faded as his wounded squadmates fought to stay hidden from the Vex patrols that were searching the forest. Ahead, the massive fortress rose from the landscape like a dark mountain, its black walls bristling with weapons and energy shields. Back at the hidden position where his squadmates waited, Dr. Krillith worked frantically to stop the bleeding from Captain Vorth's cracked crystalline shell. The Kandorian's life fluid continued to leak despite the medical patches, and his normally bright inner light was growing dim. Lieutenant Zextar sat propped against a tree, his blue face pale with pain, as he monitored their only working scanner. "Morrison's signal is moving toward the outer defenses," Zextar reported, his musical voice strained. "The scanner shows him approaching the first guard tower." Sergeant Lisa Hayes crouched beside the injured Zephyrian, her own scanner displaying tactical information about the fortress. "There are 50 soldiers in that section alone. He cannot possibly get through without being detected." "Maybe that is his plan," Dr. Krillith said quietly, his scales showing the gray color of deep worry. "Perhaps he intends to create a distraction while we escape." Lisa shook her head, knowing more about Jake's capabilities than she had ever told the others. "Jake does not sacrifice himself for others. He finds another way." The scanner in Zextar's hands began to show impossible readings. According to the sensors, Jake was moving faster than any humanoid should be able to travel. The device showed him covering ground at speeds that would require mechanical assistance, but they all knew he was traveling alone on foot. "The scanner must be malfunctioning," Captain Vorth whispered, his translator crackling with static from his damaged systems. "These readings cannot be accurate." "The scanner is working perfectly," Lisa said, watching the display with a mixture of pride and concern. "Jake is just showing you what he really is." On the screen, they watched as Jake's signal reached the first guard tower. The fortress defenses consisted of multiple layers of security, starting with automated sentries and patrol units in the outer perimeter. Intelligence reports had indicated that each guard tower contained at least 10 Vex soldiers equipped with heavy weapons and communication equipment. "Energy discharge detected," Zextar reported, watching the scanner with growing amazement. "Multiple weapons firing in the guard tower area." But instead of the prolonged firefight they expected, the weapons fire stopped after only a few seconds. The scanner showed Jake's signal moving away from the tower and toward the next defensive position. Behind him, the guard tower's power signature had gone completely dark. "Impossible," Dr. Krillith breathed, his 6 arms trembling as he continued to treat Vorth's injuries. "One soldier cannot neutralize an entire guard post in seconds." "He just did," Lisa said simply. And that was just the beginning. Jake's signal continued to move through the fortress defenses with impossible speed and efficiency. Guard tower. After guard tower went dark as he passed, their power signatures disappearing from the scanner like candles being blown out by a strong wind. The automated defense systems that should have detected and eliminated any intruder seem to have no effect on his advance. The motion sensors are showing movement patterns that make no sense, Zexstar said, his silver eyes wide with disbelief. According to this data, Morrison is moving fast enough to dodge energy blasts and strong enough to tear through armored barriers. Lisa looked at her injured friends, all of whom were staring at the scanner with expressions of shock and confusion. She had known this moment would come eventually when Jake would be forced to reveal the truth about what he was. The secret that his family had kept for generations was about to be exposed to beings from other worlds. Jake's great-great-grandfather was a test pilot in the 1940s, she said quietly. He volunteered for an experimental program that the human government kept classified for decades. What kind of experimental program? Dr. Krillith asked, his medical training making him focus on the scientific implications. Genetic enhancement, Lisa replied. The human military was trying to create super soldiers during World War II. They only managed to enhance a few dozen people before the program was shut down, but the genetic modifications were passed down to their children. Captain Vorth's crystalline form pulsed weakly as he processed this information. You are saying that Morrison carries enhanced genetic material? The enhancements are dormant most of the time, Lisa explained. They only activate under extreme stress or when the carrier chooses to awaken them. Jake has spent his entire life keeping his abilities hidden, pretending to be a normal human. On the scanner, Jake's signal had reached the main fortress walls. The massive barriers were designed to stop assault vehicles and withstand bombardment from starship weapons. But, as they watched, sections of the wall began to show structural damage. Energy readings spiked and fell as defensive systems failed, one after another. The fortress is responding to his presence, Zexstar said, his voice filled with awe. They are activating emergency protocols and calling in reinforcements from other sectors. How many soldiers are in that fortress? Dr. Krillith asked. Over 200, Lisa replied. Elite Vex warriors with the best equipment their empire can provide. And Morrison is fighting all of them alone? No, Lisa said, watching the scanner as explosions began to light up the fortress interior. He is not fighting them. He is doing what his ancestors did when they stopped holding back. He is showing them what humans were before we learned to hide our true nature. The scanner showed massive energy discharges throughout the fortress as Jake moved deeper into the structure. Entire sections of the building were losing power, and the defensive systems that had protected the facility for years were failing in sequence. The readings were so extreme that the device kept flashing warning messages about sensor overload. The stories you mocked earlier, Lisa said to her squadmates. The myths about gods and heroes with impossible strength and speed. Those were not fantasies, they were memories. Memories of what? Captain Vorth asked weakly. Memories of what humans used to be before we decided that the galaxy was not ready for the truth about our species. Zeus, Hercules, Thor, all the legendary figures from human mythology. They were real people with real names, and they had abilities just like Jake's. Lieutenant Zexstar looked up from the scanner, his face showing a mixture of fear and wonder. You are telling us that human mythology is based on actual enhanced individuals? Human civilization is much older than we taught the Galactic Alliance, Lisa said. We have been hiding our true capabilities for thousands of years, pretending to be a young species that just developed space travel. The truth is that enhanced humans like Jake's ancestors built the first Terran Empire long before any of our current allies developed interstellar technology. On the scanner, Jake's signal had reached the central complex of the fortress. The weapon facility that they had been sent to destroy was located in the deepest part of the structure, protected by the most advanced security systems the Vex Empire could design. But the power readings from that section were already fluctuating as Jake encountered and overcame each defensive measure. If humans possess these capabilities, Dr. Krillith said slowly, why do you hide them? Such abilities would be invaluable. In the war against the Vex? Lisa looked at her wounded friends, aliens who had served alongside humans for years without ever suspecting the truth about their species. Because the last time humans stopped pretending to be normal, we conquered half the galaxy. The Alliance exists because humanity chooses to be partners rather than rulers. The scanner showed a massive explosion in the Fortress Central Complex, followed by a series of smaller detonations as secondary systems overloaded. Jake's signal began moving back toward the outer walls, leaving a trail of destroyed defenses and disabled facilities behind him. "The weapon," Zexstar said, checking the energy readings. "The gravitational weapon they were building. The power signature is gone." "Mission accomplished," Lisa said, but her voice carried no celebration. "Now you know why Jake asked if you were ready for the truth about humanity." As they watched the scanner, Jake's signal moved steadily back toward their position. Behind him, the fortress that had seemed impregnable just hours before was now a burning ruin. The Vex Empire's ultimate weapon project had been destroyed by a single human soldier, who had finally stopped hiding what he really was. "What happens now?" Captain Vorth asked. Lisa looked at the scanner one more time, then began to pack up their equipment. "Now we wait for Jake to come back, and then we all decide what to do with the knowledge that changes everything." Inside the burning fortress, Jake Morrison had stopped pretending to be an ordinary human soldier. The bronze medallion around his neck glowed with ancient power as genetic modifications that had remained dormant for decades finally awakened in his blood. His muscles moved with speed that defied physics, and his strength had grown beyond anything his alien squadmates could have imagined possible. The corridors of the Vex stronghold echoed with the sounds of destruction as Jake moved deeper into the facility. His rifle had been discarded after the first few encounters, when he realized that conventional weapons were too slow for what he had become. Instead, he used his bare hands and the environment around him, turning the fortress itself into a weapon against its defenders. A squad of Vex soldiers rounded the corner ahead of him, their reptilian faces showing surprise at finding a single human in their most secure facility. Their leader barked orders in their harsh language, and 12 plasma rifles aimed at Jake's position. But by the time their fingers squeezed the triggers, Jake was no longer there. He moved between the energy bolts like water flowing around stones, each plasma blast missing him by inches as he closed the distance to his enemies. The first soldier fell before he could fire a second shot, Jake's enhanced strength sending the armored warrior flying into the metal wall with enough force to dent the reinforced barriers. The remaining soldiers tried to track his movements, but Jake was moving faster than their eyes could follow. He appeared behind one warrior, then beside another, each touch dropping a Vex soldier to the ground with surgical precision. In less than 10 seconds, the entire squad lay unconscious on the corridor floor. Jake paused for a moment, breathing steadily despite the impossible exertion. The genetic enhancements that flowed through his bloodline had been designed by human scientists who understood that raw power was useless without perfect control. His ancestors had learned to channel their abilities with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a natural disaster. The fortress alarm systems wailed as Jake continued his advance toward the central complex. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red illumination, and automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. The plasma cannons tracked his movement and fired concentrated bursts of energy that could have melted through tank armor, but Jake moved through the defensive fire like he was dancing, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to predict where each shot would land before the targeting systems had finished calculating. He reached the first turret and placed his hand on its armored housing, crushing the metal like paper and sending sparks cascading down the corridor. More Vex soldiers appeared from side passages, these wearing the heavy armor and carrying the advanced weapons of elite units. Their commander was a massive reptilian creature with scales like black metal and eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. When he saw Jake standing alone among the destroyed defenses, he hissed orders to his troops. "Surrender now, human, and your death will be quick," the commander said in accented but understandable Alliance standard. "You are outnumbered and trapped in our stronghold." Jake looked at the 20 elite soldiers surrounding him, noting their positions and the weapons they carried. Each one was a veteran warrior trained from birth for combat, equipped with technology that represented the best the Vex Empire could produce. Under normal circumstances, they would have been more than capable of defeating an entire human military. "Unit, you want to see what humans are really capable of?" Jake asked, his voice carrying an edge that made the alien soldiers step back involuntarily. "Let me show you why your empire should have stayed away from our space." The battle that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. Jake moved through the elite soldiers like a force of nature, his enhanced speed allowing him to strike each warrior before they could react. Their advanced armor crumpled under blows that generated kinetic force equivalent to explosive charges, and their sophisticated weapons were torn from their hands and reduced to scrap metal when the corridor fell silent. Jake stood alone among the fallen enemies, his breathing still calm and controlled. The medallion around his neck pulsed with warm light, and he could feel the power of his ancestors flowing through every cell in his body. This was what humans had been before they learned to hide their true nature from the galaxy. The central complex lay just ahead, protected by the most advanced security systems the Vex Empire had ever designed. Energy barriers that could stop starship weapons blocked the entrance, while sensor arrays monitored every approach with technology that could detect the smallest movement or heat signature. Jake approached the barriers without slowing, his enhanced senses analyzing the energy patterns and frequencies that maintained the defensive fields. The genetic modifications in his bloodline included enhanced intelligence and processing speed, allowing him to understand complex systems with intuitive clarity that seemed almost supernatural. He placed his hands against the energy barrier, feeling the power that flowed through the defensive matrix. The barrier was designed to repel any physical or energy attack, but Jake was not attacking it. Instead, he was learning its harmonic frequency and finding the precise vibration needed to disrupt its stability. The energy field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass, its power dispersing harmlessly into the surrounding walls. The secondary barriers fell in sequence as Jake walked through them, each defensive system failing as he applied the exact force needed to overcome its design parameters inside the central complex. The gravitational weapon dominated the chamber like a mechanical god. The device was larger than Jake had expected, with massive components that twisted space itself into new configurations. Energy readings from the weapon indicated that it was nearly ready for testing, capable of creating gravitational anomalies that could tear apart planets or collapse entire star systems. Jake studied the weapon for several minutes, his enhanced intellect analyzing its design and function. The device was an impressive achievement of Vex engineering, representing years of research and development by their most brilliant scientists. But like all technology, it had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who understood its fundamental principles. He began to dismantle the weapon with the same precision he had used to defeat the fortress defenders. Each component was removed or destroyed in exactly the right sequence to prevent any possibility of reconstruction. The gravitational field generators were crushed beyond repair, while the control systems were reduced to smoking wreckage. As Jake worked, alarms continued to sound throughout the fortress. Reinforcements were arriving from other parts of the complex, but they moved too slowly to reach the central chamber before his work was complete. The weapon that had threatened the entire galaxy was being methodically destroyed by a single human who had finally revealed his true capabilities. The last component fell silent as Jake completed the destruction of the gravitational weapon. Around him, the central complex was filled with the wreckage of Vex technology and the unconscious forms of soldiers who had tried to stop him. The mission was complete, but Jake knew that everything had changed. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. His alien squadmates had seen what he was capable of, and soon the entire Galactic Alliance would learn that humans were not the peaceful neighbors they had pretended to be. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their diplomacy. It had been their restraint. Jake Morrison looked around the destroyed chamber one final time, then began his journey back to where his squadmates waited. Behind him, the fortress continued to burn as emergency systems failed and structural supports gave way under the damage he had inflicted. The storm had passed, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy forever. Commander Jake Morrison emerged from the burning fortress as the twin suns of Kepler 442b painted the alien sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind him, the massive Vex stronghold collapsed in sections, its structural supports failing as fires spread through the complex. The gravitational weapon that had threatened entire star systems was now nothing more than twisted metal and scattered components. Jake carried the intelligence data they had been sent to retrieve, along with the core components of the weapons. Control system. The mission objectives had been completed, but he knew that success had come at a price that would change everything. His alien squad mates had witnessed impossible readings on their scanners, and soon they would demand explanations that would shatter their understanding of humanity. As he walked through the purple forest toward the hidden position where his wounded teammates waited, Jake felt the genetic enhancements slowly returning to their dormant state. The incredible strength and speed that had allowed him to destroy an entire fortress was fading back into the depths of his DNA, waiting for the next moment of extreme need. The bronze medallion around his neck had stopped glowing, but it still felt warm against his chest. The ancient artifact had been passed down through generations of his family, each bearer carrying the secret of what humanity had once been and what they could become again if the need arose. When Jake reached the concealed location, he found his squadmates exactly where he had left them. Dr. Krillith was still working to stabilize Captain Vorth's injuries, his 6 arms moving with practiced precision as he applied medical treatments to the cracked crystalline form. Lieutenant Zexstar sat propped against a tree, his silver eyes wide with questions that he was afraid to ask. Sergeant Lisa Hayes looked up as Jake approached, relief evident on her face despite her knowledge of his capabilities. She had known him longer than any of the others, but seeing him return from an impossible mission still filled her with emotions she could barely control. "Mission accomplished," Jake said simply, setting down the intelligence data and weapon components. "The gravitational device has been destroyed, and I recovered everything our scientists will need to understand how it worked." His alien squadmates stared at him in silence, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed through their scanners. Jake's uniform was torn and battle-scarred, but he showed no signs of the exhaustion that should have followed such intense combat. His breathing was steady, his movements were controlled, and his expression was calm. "Jake," Lieutenant Zexstar said carefully, his musical voice trembling with uncertainty. "What exactly are you?" Jake sat down heavily on a fallen log, the weight of centuries of family secrets pressing down on his shoulders. He looked at each of his squadmates in turn, seeing the mixture of awe and fear in their alien faces. These beings had served alongside him for 3 years, trusting him with their lives in dozens of battles, but they had never truly known what he was. "I am what humans call a genetic throwback," Jake explained, his voice quiet but steady. "Most of our species evolved past the need for physical enhancement thousands of years ago, but some bloodlines retained the traits from the early experiments. We are the descendants of the first generation of enhanced humans." "The gods of your mythology?" Captain Vorth asked, his crystalline voice crackling through his damaged translator. "Not gods," Jake corrected. "Just soldiers with abilities that seemed godlike to normal humans. Zeus, Thor, Hercules, all the legendary figures from our ancient stories were real people with real names. My family line traces back to one of them." Dr. Krillith's scales showed the deep blue color of intense curiosity as his scientific mind tried to understand the implications. "The genetic modifications you carry, how long have they existed in human DNA?" "Longer than recorded history," Lisa answered. "The enhancement programs went back to the earliest days of human civilization. What most people think of as mythology was actually oral history passed down through families like Jake's." "But why hide such capabilities?" Zexstar asked. "These abilities would be invaluable in military conflicts." Jake's expression grew serious as he considered how to explain the truth about human history. "Because the last time humans stopped pretending to be normal, we built an empire that controlled most of the known galaxy. The Terran Empire was not founded through diplomacy and trade agreements. It was conquered by people like me. The forest fell silent except for the distant sounds of the burning fortress. Jake's squadmates exchanged glances, their understanding of human history beginning to shift as they realized the implications of what he was telling them. The Galactic Alliance exists because humanity chooses to be partners rather than rulers, Jake continued. We integrate with other species by pretending to be a young civilization that just developed space travel. The truth is that enhanced humans have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. How many others like you exist? Captain Vorth asked. More than you might think, fewer than you might fear, Jake replied. We live normal lives, serve in normal occupations, and raise families just like any other humans. The abilities only manifest under extreme circumstances. Dr. Krillith finished his medical work and turned his attention fully to Jake. The readings we observed during your assault on the fortress, they exceeded the theoretical limits of organic enhancement. How is such performance possible? Jake pulled out his medallion and held it so his squadmates could see the ancient bronze. Clearly, the carved figure depicted a man wielding lightning bolts, his face bearing an unmistakable resemblance to Jake's features. The early enhancement programs were more successful than anyone realized. They did not just improve physical capabilities, they fundamentally changed what it means to be human. What happens now? Lisa asked, though she already knew that their small squad could never be the same after this revelation. Now we return to the Alliance and file our mission report, Jake said, tucking the medallion back beneath his uniform. We tell them that the Vex weapon has been destroyed and that we recovered valuable intelligence about their technology, and the truth about what you are. Zextar pressed. Jake looked at his alien friends, beings who had shared danger and hardship with him for years without ever suspecting his true nature. That depends on whether you think the galaxy is ready to learn that humanity has been hiding its real capabilities for generations. The war will be over soon, Captain Vorth observed, his crystalline form pulsing weakly. When peace comes, what role will enhanced humans play in galactic society? The same role we have always played, Jake replied. We will be the friendly neighbors who happen to be really good at fixing starship engines and growing food. The galaxy benefits more from thinking humans are harmless than from knowing what we could do if we chose to stop being harmless. And if another threat emerges? Dr. Krillith asked. Something that requires abilities like yours? Jake smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. Then the galaxy will discover that human restraint is not the same thing as human weakness. The sound of approaching engines interrupted their conversation as the rescue ship appeared above the forest canopy. The stealth vessel descended through the purple trees, its hull scarred from combat but still functional. As the squad prepared for extraction, Jake helped his wounded teammates toward the landing zone. The official report will state that our mission succeeded due to superior tactics and lucky timing, Lisa said as they walked. No one needs to know how it really happened. Jake nodded, but he knew that everything had changed. His squadmates would never look at him the same way again, and through them, knowledge of humanity's true nature would slowly spread through the Alliance military structure. 3 months later, the war against the Vex Empire ended with their unconditional surrender. Official records credited the victory to superior Alliance technology and coordination between member species. The classified reports, however, noted several instances where human operatives had achieved impossible results under extreme circumstances. Jake Morrison returned to his duties as a standard infantry commander, his extraordinary abilities once again dormant beneath the surface of an ordinary soldier. But his alien squadmates never forgot what they had witnessed, and they never again dismissed the myths and legends of any species as mere fantasy. The galaxy continued to see humanity as peaceful partners in galactic civilization, unaware that their restraint was the only thing standing between order and the return of an empire, built by beings who could reshape worlds with their bare hands.